In the early years of the 20th century, the world was changing fast. Empires spanned continents, new technologies shrank distances, and nations were more connected and more competitive than ever before. But few could have imagined the scale of destruction and transformation that lay just ahead. World War I, then called the Great War, would redraw maps, topple empires, and claim over 16 million lives. For a time, America stood apart, watching from across the Atlantic. But neutrality would not last. This is the story of how the United States went from an isolated observer to a decisive force in the war's outcome, and how the peace that followed planted the seeds for another, even deadlier conflict. Let's get started. By 1914, Europe stood on a razor's edge. Two massive alliances dominated the continent. On one side, the Triple Entente, made up of Britain, France, and Russia. On the other, the Triple Alliance, made up of Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Italy. Though these alliances appeared evenly matched, the real friction came from the two great powers at the center, Britain and Germany. But the spark that set Europe ablaze came not from those two titans, but from the Balkans. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. What could have been a regional incident rapidly exploded, fueled by tangled alliances and rising nationalism. By August 3rd, Germany had declared war on Russia and France and invaded Belgium. The very next day, Britain entered the war. By early 1915, much of Europe and even parts of Asia were engulfed in a conflict unlike any before. Across the Atlantic, President Woodrow Wilson pleaded with Americans to remain impartial in thought as well as deed. He hoped that the United States might mediate peace and uphold its longstanding policy of neutrality. But neutrality was easier said than done. Most Americans sympathized with Britain. Vivid tales, often exaggerated by British propagandists, painted the Germans as brutal aggressors, especially after their attacks in Belgium and France. Meanwhile, Britain's powerful navy imposed a blockade, intercepting U.S. shipments to Germany. Though Washington protested, Britain often paid for confiscated goods, keeping American businesses quiet. Quietly, the United States drifted away from neutrality and into becoming the arsenal of the Allies. In response to Britain's blockade, Germany turned to a new weapon, the submarine, or as they called it, the U boat. In early 1915, the German Navy announced it would sink enemy ships on sight. On May 7th, 1915, a German U boat torpedoed the Lusitania, a British passenger liner. The ship was carrying both civilians and munitions. Of the 1,198 killed, 128 were Americans. Public outrage in the United States was swift and furious. Germany temporarily halted its submarine campaign, but as the war dragged on, they resumed attacks. In 1916, another ship, the Arabic, was sunk. Though Wilson still clung to neutrality, he asked Congress to prepare the military. He ran for re-election in 1916 with the slogan, "He kept us out of war." Yet behind the scenes, tensions were rising. In early 1917, Britain intercepted a telegram that changed everything. Sent by German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmermann to the German ambassador in Mexico, The Zimmerman telegram proposed a startling plan. If Mexico joined Germany in a war against the United States, it would regain the territory lost in the Mexican American War. The telegram also hinted that Japan might join in. When American newspapers published the telegram, public opinion turned decisively against Germany. On April 2nd, 1917, just weeks after German submarines had sunk 3 American ships, Wilson asked Congress for a declaration of war. 4 days later, the United States formally entered World War I, but not without debate. 50 representatives and 6 senators still voted against it. By 1917, the European armies were exhausted. The Allies desperately needed fresh troops, supplies, and morale. America answered the call. The U.S. Navy sent destroyers to help battle German U boats and to lay anti submarine mines in the North Sea. Their impact was immediate. Allied shipping losses dropped dramatically from nearly 900,000 tons in April of 1917 to just 112,000 by October 1918. Still, naval help alone wasn't enough. America needed boots on the ground. In May of 1917, Congress passed the Selective Service Act, initiating a national draft. 3 million men were drafted, and another 2 million were enlisted. By the spring of 1918, American troops were in the trenches. 8 months later, on November 11th, 1918, the war was over. Germany surrendered and guns fell silent. Victory brought not just peace, but also the challenge of how to secure it. Wilson's answer came in January of 1918, even before the war ended, when he presented his 14 points. The plan called for the freedom of the seas, lower tariffs and free trade, arms reductions, self determination for all peoples, an end to colonialism, and most importantly, the creation of a League of Nations, an international body designed to maintain peace and prevent future wars. While Wilson's vision inspired hope, not everyone shared his idealism. When the victors met in Paris, the European allies demanded revenge. They rejected much of Wilson's 14 points and insisted on punishing Germany severely. Under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was stripped of its colonies and territory. They were disarmed. They were forced to pay massive reparations and made to accept total blame for the war. Historians today agree the treaty's harsh terms left Germany humiliated and economically crippled, conditions that helped sow the seeds for World War II. Yet Wilson did manage to get one part of his vision into the treaty: the League of Nations. When Wilson returned to America, he expected Senate ratification of the Treaty of Versailles, but instead, he faced bitter opposition. Under the U.S. Constitution, the president negotiates treaties, but they require Senate approval. And the sticking point was Article 10 of the League's covenant, which many feared would limit Congress's power to declare war. The Senate divided into 3 camps. Democrats backed Wilson and the treaty. Irreconcilables, mostly Republicans, opposed the League entirely. And then you had reservationists, led by Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, who wanted changes before approval was given. Wilson refused to compromise. He rejected the Lodge reservations outright. When the amended treaty came to a vote, Democrats joined the irreconcilables and The treaty was defeated. America never ratified the Treaty of Versailles. It never joined the League of Nations. And as the 1920s dawned, the nation turned inward. Weary of war and wary of entangling alliances, the United States returned to a period of isolationism. Wilson, trying to rally the public in favor of the League, embarked on a national speaking tour. But in the middle of it, he suffered a major stroke, and with it, the last hope of the treaty's ratification vanished. Today, historians still ask, could the League of Nations have prevented World War II if the United States had been involved? We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is this. In 1917, America joined the fight to end all wars and emerged as a new global power, forever changed. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.